Hello, tonight our lesson is on perfect squares. Whenever we multiply a number by itself, that is called squaring. So for instance, if I have the number 3, if I'm going to square that number, I would use a 2 exponent, and then I would show the factors that I'm multiplying are going to be 3 times 3, and that would give me the value of 9. Geometrically, this multiplication can be represented as a square. If I had a square shape that had a length of 3 and a width of 3, if I multiply 3 times 3, I would get an area equal to 9 square units. Alright, so when we talk about perfect squares, we're talking about numbers that start with the number 1 and then increase by 1 in the positive direction, and we're squaring each of those numbers to get a list of perfect squares. So for instance, 1 squared would be 1, 2 squared would be 4, 3 squared would be 9, 4 squared would be 16, etc., etc. Alright, so for your homework tonight, you're going to list the perfect squares starting with the number 1 up to the number 25. So you're just going to make a list where number 1, if you take the number 1 and square it, you get 1. Okay, the second number in your list is the number 2 squared, which is 4. The third is the number 3, which 3 squared is 9. The fourth is the number 4. 4 squared is 16, 4 times 4. And then the number 5 would be 5 squared, 5 times 5, that's 25. So continue this list all the way to 25. Alright, so you have a good start. You have the first 5 perfect squares. So continue and fill in the list. Then go to the next slide. Now let's talk about square root. Square root is the inverse operation to squaring a number. Just like division is an inverse operation to multiplication, or subtraction's an inverse operation for addition, this works the same way. So for instance, if I have 5 squared, we know that equals 25. Well, if I take the square root of 25, what that means is what number times itself would equal 25. And so the answer would be 5. Alright, so here are a list of some square roots that should be on your perfect square list. Alright, so I want you to go ahead and write the answers for each of them. The square root of 625, square root of 289, square root of 361, square root of 225, square root of 144, and square root of 81. Alright, so here we have some examples of numbers that are not perfect squares, but they're close. So whenever you have a number that's close to a perfect square, you can estimate its value because you know what the perfect square close to it would be. So for instance, here we have the square root of 98. So what I would do is find the 2 closest square roots that are perfect squares. So for instance, square root of 100 is very close to the square root of 98. The square root of 100 equals 10. So this is going to be a little bit less than 10. Now, the next closest square root below that would be square root of 81, which equals 9. So square root of 98 is between 9 and 10. However, it's a lot closer to 10 than it is to 9. So if I was going to make an estimate, I would estimate either 9.8 or 9.9. I'm going to say 9.9. And I'm going to use a little squiggly equal sign. Whenever you have an equal sign that's squiggly like that, that means approximately. So what I'm saying here is that the square root of 98 is not exactly 9.9, it's approximately 9.9. And then you can take a calculator and find that square root button and find out what it is exactly, or what it actually approximately, again, because it's not a perfect square, so we're going to have to round it off to whatever number we're asked to round it to. In this case, I'm just going to round it to the nearest tenth. All right, so if you check that on a calculator, 98 square root, you should get a number that would round to 9.9. All right, now try the next one, square root of 10. What are the two closest perfect squares? Okay, well, square root of 9 is very close. Square root of 9 equals 3. And then the next one would be square root of 16, which equals 4. So square root of 10 is between 3 and 4. However, it's a lot closer to 3 than it is to 4. So this one, I would guess 3.1 or 3.2, one of those two numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and guess 3.1. And if I'm off a little bit, that's okay, because again, it's just an estimate. And you take your calculator, put 10 into the display, hit the square root button, and you're going to get a 3 and then a bunch of decimal numbers after the decimal point, and you round it off to the nearest tenth. If it's not 3.1, then it'd probably be 3.2. It's one of those two answers. All right, here is the square root of 260. I want you to estimate what this would be to the nearest tenth. Pause your video, then restart to check your answer. Welcome back from pausing the video. The two closest perfect squares are the square root of 256, which is 16, and the square root of 289, which is 17. So this number is going to be between 16 and 17, but you can see that it's a lot closer to 16 than it is to 17. So let's take a guess. Let's guess that's going to be approximately 16.1. And if I take my calculator and enter 260 and take a square root, I do get 16.12. And a bunch of other digits come after that, but that's enough for me to see that it would round to 16.1. So yes, this would be the correct estimate. That's all for tonight.